So the Boardroom Unplugged and raising the digital quotient to navigate uncertainty. I think that's the theme. The keyword here is to navigate uncertainty, and towards that, quickly to set a context, the global war which goes on sort of perpetually, that has eventually or initially led to, say, shortage of energy supplies, rising costs, leading to inflation, leading to sort of slowdown of demand, certain economies or nations forming a group, cooperating more intensely, closely in terms of trade agreements, certain other economies trying to boycott each other and in terms of disrupting supply chain. So these global macro volatility, unpredictability continues in some form and shape. Some quarters or months it improves with certain countries. Somewhere we can read headlines last few days, there is some new tension with India and the country. So these are again beyond our control, but as business leaders, where some of our businesses are across multiple countries, across different continents, there are implications. There are implications around supply chain, around our own in-house offices, employees, colleagues, customers, and business partners, the whole ecosystem. So as business leaders, either from the technology side or from finance or marketing or operations, each of us have to take cognizance and see, okay, how do we still neutralize and navigate forward and then minimize the implications of these macroeconomic headwinds or slowdown headwinds on our businesses. So with that, I think we have a very eminent board here present and representing multiple functions, while majority of them are from the technology background. We have a couple of experts from the line of business, and that's where the most interesting part of the conversations will be. So my job is to just ask them the right questions and then help them sort of guide all of us with their deep dive knowledge, experience, insights about what they have been doing, on how they have been captaining and steering their respective organizations, ecosystems, propelling through the uncertainties and still find, unlock, and tap into opportunities in spite of all the adversities. So in maybe sequence of the order in which we are seated, I'll start maybe from the farthest end and starting with Vinod, who's from the banking domain, a very respected name and leader in data analytics and building newer intelligences for large banking domains. So, Vinod, maybe to begin with, as I maybe start with a banking domain example. This field and domain is fiercely competitive, and there are ups and downs in terms of demands, in terms of, I would say, risk profiles, certain times or phases of sort of disruptions where banks have to be overcautious in terms of maybe double downing on the credit worthiness of both either consumers or organizations or at a sort of corporate level. So how in times of challenge, data analytics and AI can still help unlock, untap opportunities from all the adversities? What would be your guidance to steer forward the organization in testing times?
Yeah, thank you, Shantanu. Very interesting question. First of all, thank you for inviting me out here. Now, as far as downturns go, there's not a single industry that we can think about which has not gone through a downturn. Downturns are cyclical. Now banks are in a sweet spot, but if you go 2-3 years ago, banks were in the all-time high in terms of NPAs. Private banks had an NPR around 5%. Public sector banks were around 12%, which was unheard of earlier. But we've gone through that phase, and that will continue. There'll be ups and downs in every industry. Now, how do you try and overcome them with data analytics? All of us know that data is the new oil, right? And therefore, you also know that the amount of data that we collect, we're almost doubling the data every 2 years. The data doubles. So imagine the amount of data that's available. We have data available from mobile phones, from laptops, from any other devices, and smartphones and everything that is there, right? So what we can do in terms of downturn is look inwards into your own organization and see how you are evaluating that data. You have data, for example, if you take a bank today, they would have data across different systems of course, different customers. So if you take Shantanu, for example, he would be a customer of a bank today. So he would have a retail profile. He would be opening FDs. FDs would be, he would be opening mutual funds. He'll be opening, he's also a CEO of Strategy Inc. So do you have today enough information stored and accessible to the bank on Shantanu basis, which you can cross-sell and upsell him different products? That's the first thing that you can do, right? Know your customers properly. Second thing is how to increase sales. Now, can basis your data, if you have some imprint of a customer who's come to you either through a web or any other, and he has not completed a transaction, whether it's an account opening or FD, can you go back to him and nudge him slowly and say that, okay, sir, you had come, or ma'am, you had come, you were trying to open FD, you couldn't complete the transaction, can we help you? And that is another way of using data to try and complete those transactions. Then reducing costs. Like Shantanu was saying, credit risk is a very, very important part of banking today, right? Because we owe to our shareholders and stockholders and depositors that any money that is given gets back with interest. So there also we are using a lot of data and AI, basis some scorecards and propensity models to understand what's the risk profile of Shantanu today. Is he good enough to give a loan? What loan and what tenure, right? And tomorrow if something happens, or if there's a blue sky event, something like a COVID happens, what is the likelihood that a customer will pay back? Or do I need to cut my losses and say, okay, 100 I had given, I'll give 80, you 80 basically you give back 80 and we'll call it quits. Something like that. So data is very, very important, and that's how within banking system and financial systems, we're trying to use that data. I hope I've answered part of the question.
Great. I think with that, I'll summarize it as customer intelligence and sales intelligence, and how we incrementally achieve those during times which are difficult and neutralize the adverse effects. With that, I'll come to Chetan, and Chetan and I fortunately have interacted in the past around this very common and I would say subject of the digital CFO. And this is something which is of common interest. So Chetan, as the digital CFO, how do you see generative AI playing a role in context of not only the finance function, but overall at a business function level? And because this cutting edge, forward looking technology, do you see experimentations or pilots happening? And if yes, where do you see the potential and prospect?
Good afternoon, everyone. And thanks, Shantanu, for inviting me again, which means I've done well last time. So
we learn from all these erudite leaders.
So any technology today forms the backbone of any company, right? And when I say backbone, it's the most essential part of a human body, and it's the most important part of an organization. The more robust you have your technology systems in place, there is more robust reporting, in the sense that at a click of a button, I know if I even have 50 businesses across the group, I know which business is doing well, which is not doing well, what do I need to do to correct that. Today, using technology, I can kind of simulate what's going to be next. So to give you an example, in the COVID phase, we didn't let go of a single human being because we knew that these are trained people who would need it in the future. But we did simulate that if business grows in a particular way, what are the losses that we're going to incur, be ready for those losses, and then see how we can kind of in the future try to recuperate or try to make up for those losses. AI is moving more and more technologically. It's so easy that a kid today comes home and says, Alexa, play me this song. And Alexa actually, listens to a 6-year-old's command, right? Someone who can't even pronounce Alexa can, listen to a song from choicest things, right? There's Siri who, you just command and the poor lady just goes all over the place and gets you the answer, right? So AI in a generative world is even more evolving. Yeah, I can actually, in a manufacturing setup, I am not from a manufacturing setup, but I can tell you, I can query what is the inventory in my Nagpur plant of so-and-so raw material, and do I need to reorder it in the next 10 days, So obviously the systems are automated, but those kind of queries can be put to a common system which goes and does things. We've now moved 30 years from, taking out a trial balance from a typewriter to moving to real-time systems. So I think technology is moving, and technology is our backbone and the most needed thing today.
Fantastic. I think bringing in newer levels of predictability is what I summarize as what you've just sort of shared with us. So, Deepali, coming to you, we look up to you as the data-driven, AI-powered CMO and the leader of, or industry captain in the marketing field. You have led diverse businesses in the consumer space, in the enterprise space, across diverse lines of businesses. So, and we live in a world where there is also overflow of data, correct? So in that context, where do you see CMOs and how can they harmonize data, AI and analytics for larger good of the business?
So Shantanu, thank you for saying that. And I want to poke fun at the marketing function, itself a little bit. But just to give you the background, I worked in financial services. I worked with IBM, which is what he was referring to as the enterprise level. And I now work at CK Birla Group, and we have 10 different businesses, B2B, B2C, healthcare, building products, automobiles, etc. One of the things that I want to say is that when you ask the question, how are the CMOs harmonizing the data? The biggest issue is that not all CMOs are equal in terms of their understanding of data, how familiar they are with using data models, and their personal inclination towards the comfort that they have with learning new concepts, learning numbers, learning AI, etc. So I think one biggest issue that you face is there are clearly different cohorts of CMOs that exist in the market, but two I particularly want to refer to. One is the CMO with vintage, who for the first 20 years has spent time doing only brand and communications, was never exposed to data, business, and P&L responsibilities, and has not bothered to learn, Some of them may have learned a little bit and posture quite a bit. And from the IBM context, I can tell you, and some of you will agree, that a lot of CEOs also posture, okay? So many of you will not say that. That's one. And then, you're sandwiched with the new generation of marketing folks who grew up in consumer tech businesses, who understand how to use data extremely well, primarily use it for acquisition function, and do not understand how to build brands at all, So that's the tragedy that you have in most organizations. Most fantastic organizations who we know of as examples and cohorts of using data extremely well, banking being also there, consumer tech businesses, healthcare where I am, the marketing function, when they are given the responsibility of managing the P&L, use the data extremely well for acquisition. Our gentleman's example over here were also more acquisition examples. Very, very few businesses and very smart CEOs and boards will actually use the data to build products, will use the data to bring insights, will use the data to do interesting continuous segmentation, and will use the data for creating customer delight and experience and building brands for a long period of time. And I don't blame them. You require the ecosystem, you require environment, and you require a certain set of thinking to be able to do that. Then, of course, you're also, on the other end, you have businesses, which may not lend themselves very well, to usage of data. Let's say, for example, and you and I were discussing automobiles, right? The automobiles business, while on one side it has the connected cars, but when it comes to day-to-day running of the marketing operations, there's not much that you can do in terms of data-led insights, with the work that you're doing. In the work that we do inside hospitals, there is a lot of regulation, there is a lot of constraint that we have in terms of how to use the data. So sometimes those kind of constraints, exist. And then the last bit that I want to refer to is that a lot of the times, CMOs do not make very good friends with the CTOs and CIOs also. And I know that I'm sitting in, among us a fraternity, which is both the CIO's office and the CMO's office over here. So I think it's extremely important that the two functions, work very well. But I think my appeal is more to the marketing audiences, wherever they are, they're listening, which is don't be shy of data, don't be scared of data, learn how to use it for brand building.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think the best thing I take away from what you summarized is the importance of human ingenuity combined with data and, I would say, artificial intelligence.
Absolutely.
That's where this combination brings the unique power.
Yeah, and off late in the last 6 months, by the way, this is again a small quip. I've noticed that people tend to use the word AI synonymous with generative AI. The two are not the same. Okay, so, another one.
Thank you. Thanks. Paritosh, coming to you, and Paritosh heads two key functions, analytics as well as strategy. So maybe I'll try tapping into the strategy hat of yours first. And again, in uncertain times when the boardroom is tense, businesses or numbers are not always speaking in favor of what leaders or the boardroom aspire it to be, what could be some of the strategic leadership traits that you think helps members who are part of the boardroom or aspiring to be in the boardroom during times of flux, times of unpredictability?
So the dynamics has completely changed in the last decade. Earlier, strategy was driving technology. Technology is driving strategy. And at this point of time, we are flooded with more technology solutions than their problems, which we need to solve on the ground. So it's a problem of plenty. How the conversations have changed, I'll come to later. But when you talk about the strategic trait, which we focus on, it's very important, and I keep saying this, is that try to fall in love with the problem first. The more you fall in love with the problem, it's easier that the more innovative and the elegant and simpler solution you'll reach at. And that's a task which I think every leader, every CEO should do, with full obsession. So it's not about that, ChatGPT came in and now everything needs to be ChatGPT. Okay? Your user interface, your customer interaction, things like that. Please understand the problem first. And that continues to be a resounding need and an ask in the boardroom. When we sit with our leaders, across businesses, that's what it makes the difference. So I think that's the most important trait I would say.
Fantastic. So again, if I want to summarize, maybe having a positive, optimistic mindset towards dealing with adversities as much with passion, the way we love to get into positive situations. So dealing with optimism possibly brings out newer ways of sort of navigating or steering through challenges. Fantastic. Thanks for bringing that insight. Coming next to Tejasvi, again, a stalwart from the banking industry as the head of data analytics in HDFC Bank. So Tejasvi, coming back to the growth story and being from a bank which is in the private banking sector space, has been the leader for years together, it's not easy to hold on to your leadership. There is extra hard work that one has to do to maintain the position, right? So what would be 3 ways to improve business growth or sort of retain and still accelerate business growth? Maybe top 3 tips leveraging data, AI, analytics.
Yeah, that's a great question, Shantanu.
And that too in a space which is fiercely competitive.
Indeed. So at the outset, I think you asked for 3 tips. I'll give you 2. There are 2 ways to, perhaps leverage data. One is to directly monetize it, which I think, Vinod has already touched upon. The other aspect is indirectly monetizing data, as well as directly monetizing data, 2 factors. But when we look at the stalwarts, something like Facebook or LinkedIn, what they really do is, they get to commercialize data by packaging perhaps the leads, which in fact are in, out there in the marketplace, and that's direct monetization of data. So there's a revenue stream which in fact, stems up from having to sell data to parties, be it, other businesses which perhaps can leverage on the leads. But at the outset, I think we can look at organizations like Bloomberg or FactSet, which in fact package data that can be corporate related. And that is a revenue stream which is more prominent, has been there for quite some years. I think specifically in India, most organizations haven't looked at directly monetizing data because legally and contractually we need to go through lots of loops to be able to do that. And with the DPB coming in, there might be a larger thought that needs to apply to companies which are directly monetizing data. The other aspect is, as we already looked at certain thoughts from, S-Bank, Vinod, we can look at nudging customers through the digital journeys, whoever are not able to, perhaps get a credit card application complete and they are dropping off. And at the outset, I think we can look at having to provide offline support by digitally having to collect the data and having an outbound call center call up the customer and understand what are the challenges in terms of seamlessly having the card being delivered to the customer. And the level of use cases we can look at are plentiful, I would say. But at the outset, the boardroom, what are they supposed to be concerned on in India specifically? Because having been on the boards of international organizations like IQ International, I think what I sense is in India, there is awareness of data, which just started 3 to 4 years ago. And I have seen this with my erstwhile bank as well. Privacy is quite nascent. Having to leverage data in its native form is nascent. I think what organizations in India would require is perhaps a level of maturity on the awareness of how to leverage data. I think if that comes in, we'll be on par with most of the global banks, global organizations, by having to state that, we are able to monetize on data either directly or indirectly.
Thank you. Just an extension on what you just mentioned, data monetization or data leverage. To what extent you see in reality that the technology leaders or teams drive that agenda today versus business tells them how to drive that agenda and they sort of enable it with technology? Is the shift equally balanced today, or is there still a swing in favor of business still coming back and telling here is what we need and then technical team you solve how you want to deliver?
Well, I think the shift, as you rightly said, is happening today. At the outset, we can still see the banking ecosystem having IT ownership of data today. So IT is supposed to be data custodians because the CIOs help us having to provide us the infrastructure that we need to leverage data. But at the outset, I think globally the organizations have shifted their mindset. The boards have shifted their mindset to business ownership of data. And that's where I think we as a community for data have been trying to evangelize the thought that we need to have business owners seamlessly translate themselves into personas of data owners. I think as we get to that particular state, I think it will be blissful.
Excellent. Yeah, we are driving towards that synergy for sure. Great, thank you. Coming to Akash, again, thank you for joining, Akash. And I want to tap into your consumer business and data and analytics leadership experience in that space. So in context of data analytics and for a leading consumer business, how do you see data analytics and AI catalyzing hyper-personalization as well as customer loyalty and renewed trust?
Yeah, thanks, Shantanu. So I think personalization or hyper-personalization is not new, right? And I'm sure Dipali is going to agree to it. I think marketing teams have been on it for last 20 years, if not more. But I think it's, while significant progress has been made, just the fact that consumers are demanding more and more makes it that much more challenging to continue to deliver on that. And also on the technology front, right? So I'm pretty sure every organization has a customer 360 or some version of customer 360. But what is happening is it's just becoming that much more complex to continue to enhance that customer 360 because the consumers are now interacting with the brand in maybe 20 odd touch points. And the consumer really expects that the brand should understand me from all those 20 interactions, right? And it's actually more for loyal consumers, right? Or for more engaged consumers. So if I love a brand for whatever reason, I really expect the brand also to understand me that much better. And I think in today's world, that drives more loyalty, where if a brand really knows me, understands me, and is able to deliver to me what I need, that's what drives loyalty. And I think that's where personalization is heading, but it's not getting any easier, unfortunately.
Understand. And if we decode the complexity behind making this digitally happen, I think the touch points are enormous, and combining people, process, technology, it makes all the more sort of multiple moving parts to be able to stitch it together. Deepali, you want to add something on this? Mic for Deepali, please.
So on the personalization bit, I just wanted to say that I think where the path has been traveled is in the superficial aspect of, you know, my name being right and address being right and people recognizing me and the cookies and stuff like that. What has not happened is actually the product experience or the service experience being designed for me bases the data, that transactional data that exists within organizations. You know, and that is true for most places, whether it is an IoT-based service or whether it is banking or, you know, even the simple payment systems that you have. You know, despite Indian population actually very routinely giving away data, you know, to all the service providers, that has not yet happened. New products being designed for people bases the data, you know, that they have, or the service experience being customized.
Excellent. Thanks for adding to that. So I think a brilliant round one of interaction insight. So we'll do a quick round two, and we'll keep round two shorter and faster so that we still have about 22 minutes left on the clock, maybe about one minute each for round two from the boardroom here, and then we'll open it up. I want to include all of us together as part of a larger boardroom and see if there are some nice Q&A interaction. So coming back to Vinod, and again, keeping the people, process, technology, and culture, that consideration in mind, especially for large, complex, big organizations. You see, none of us started developing technology stacks thinking that on someday we will have to integrate, synergize, consolidate, have a unified view, etc. Right? So everything grows in silos and in sort of organically over a period of time, and then people change, environments change, newer technologies come, which is very, very dynamic. So keeping all these moving parts aside or into consideration, what would be some practical tips you would have for technology leaders to still keep the complexity in control and be able to move forward with minimal disruption of modernization?
Right. See, generally what happens is if you, you know, you're right when you say a lot of us work in silos, each department works in silos, they're not willing to share data. But that depends on the culture that you develop as an organization. Now, if I were to ask anybody, if you know what is the average age of a board member today, can anybody tell me in India or abroad? 70. Not really. So it's around, globally it's around 60, in India it's around 57, right? But when you have to change culture, it has to start from the top. Now, in the boardroom first, as IT professionals, what we need to do is we need to educate our board. There are a lot of new technologies that have come up, right? You have UPI, APIs which are there, Aadhaar which is there, you know, a lot of other technologies which have come, and which generative AI is also there. A lot of technology which have come, which our board they've heard of, but they don't know the practical uses of that. And if you ask any board member today, are you interested in getting this implemented? They would say yes. But they would not know how to go about it. So as CIOs, CTOs, analysts, you know, we need to go and educate our board and also the senior stakeholders. So possibly what can happen is we can have a monthly, you know, IT steering committee where we are going and updating the senior management and the board about the emerging technologies and their use cases with respect to your own businesses. That's definitely one thing that can be done. Second thing is a lot of projects that we initiate, you know, once you say, okay, we want to do this, generative AI, we want to launch, 90% of the project don't see the light of the day, or they will preemptively say, okay, this has been launched and successful. But how successful it is, nobody measures. So if you have a cross-functional team at the starting itself, that okay, we are going to launch a generative AI application, and you tell us what all you want it to do. So if you have representation from, say, marketing, from manufacturing, from operations, from sales, from other areas, then okay, all of us know that, okay, this is what is possible with the generative AI, and this is what we want to do. And then therefore, it gets integrated across the organization at all levels. You start with the board, go down to the lowest level, right? So cross-functional teams definitely will help. Third would be to have a definite collaboration amongst all the team members, right? If you have cross-functional teams, you have to share data with each other. You have to see what is the benefit. Once you have tested one or two use cases and make them successful, then automatically you'll see the culture within the organization changing. If you taste success, if you taste blood, you know that it is going to be a successful. These are a couple of things that can happen at different levels for us to ensure that we don't work in silos, but it has to start with the board and percolate downwards. And once it's done that, I think it becomes easier for all of us.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks. Chetan, coming to you on a related extension, CIO-CFO relationship again has been has gone through, I would say, stages of evolution, and as we spoke in the previous round, CFOs are far more digitally savvy. They are very strongly involved in designing digital native architectures for a business, etc., to be able to scale newer heights, growth, etc. So in your experiential relationship in dealing with technology leaders or CIOs, what would be 3 tips you would have as to how CIOs should approach a CFO to have the CFO as an ally in terms of modernization budget approvals or sanctions or co-owning newer digital initiatives?
So the first and foremost should be, understanding what our organization goals are. And all our efforts should be seriously towards the organization efforts. So our collaboration in this domain in terms of finance and the CIO's role should align with the organization goals. The second is both of us should be keenly observing what's happening in the geopolitical environment. I mean, today you have one country, second day you have something else is happening somewhere else, something else is happening, a third thing is happening, some other country is aligning with someone, some fellow is traveling by train from some place to some place, so there's new alignments happening. So we have to continuously be fed with this information together and keep analyzing what's happening next. Because today we have organizations in multiple geographies, and being very, very glued to what is happening in the geopolitical environment is key to all of us, whether it's our businesses or our clients. So whether it's a debt that somebody owes you in Russia, and tomorrow you should know whether you'll get it or no, right? The third one is the collaboration, which leads by understanding what is the ROI on a project. Or everything cannot be ROI driven, but most 90% of things are ROI driven in terms of what is the saving or what is the benefit that would go after implementing a particular system or a process, which is in terms of an automation or in terms of understanding what could be done better so that tomorrow your productivity and efficiency improves.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deepali, coming to you. Just like a CFO-CIO relationship, sales and marketing as functions also have been traditionally having a little love and hate relationship, and in some organizations where sales function is stronger, they would think marketing is more a tick mark and they're passing their time and not doing enough. And likewise, the reverse also I have seen where marketing function is so very strong, they would think that, okay, we are generating all the credible pipeline, and that is where all the hard work is getting done towards what business is closing. So in your opinion, again, what would be some best practice tips that you think today a few CMOs, marketeers are in the room that they can carry back towards strengthening a CMO's ability to predict wins?
So one is clearly investing into, let's say, data-driven decision-making within marketing. But I think more importantly, putting up your hand and owning business KPIs. You know, a lot of the times marketers are very happy owning the marketing matrix, which traditionally have been carrying on. But the moment you own a business KPI, then your interest in, delivering for the business becomes very important, and the sales and marketing equation gets sorted right away, Second tip that I have is be a little selfless. Eventually that works. Because marketing actually delivers in the long term. Marketing really cannot solve, in very rare times can you collect leads and solve for this quarter. Marketing really solves for the third or the fourth quarter, So in which case, the partnership has to work very well and be a little less selfish, give the credit away to sales team so that you can build a system to show sustainable growth over a long period of time. And then the third tip that I want to give is that I think between the CIO, CMO, relationships and delivering for the business, there is always a tussle these days in investing in technology tools on OpEx versus CapEx. Okay? 10 years ago, I used to sit here on stage and say it's okay for marketing to, put OpEx money into it because marketing budgets can really support it. And then the CIO teams got onto that game and now they keep on asking for the OpEx money, from marketing. So you have to balance that out. But having said that, keep in mind that unlike, when you're investing into doing a AI or, digital factory and things like those, in the marketing world, the CapEx returns will not come beyond 3 years. Things change so quickly. So, remember that. But within the OpEx thing, whatever you're doing, fail fast, fail small. That should be the principle. I've used it always. I give 5% of my marketing budget to the team and say, run with it. Let's run some pilots. Let's run experiments. Nobody, blames them for any failures. In fact, I always take it on me and I say, I have failed when an experiment fails because it's a small experiment, nobody even minds. But the virtuosity of that cycle comes through because even if 1 out of 10 is a big success for you, it will see you through for the whole year and the ROI that you will deliver to business, will be fantastic. But eventually, it again boils down to what I said first, own the business KPIs. Anywhere in the world, I believe what gets measured gets done. So if marketing owns a sales KPI, I think that is what will give them seat on the table. I've been in situations where I've joined organizations where marketing was, a tick in the box function. But I think by the time I exited, that organization, things have changed.
Excellent. Thank you. Brilliant. And
thanks on a lighter note, coffee and cocktail also works well.
Absolutely. True. Paritosh, coming to you, we've spoken in the previous round about the importance of the acknowledged importance of data inside the boardroom. In the current context of AI and more so generative AI, how do you see is the position and acceptance of AI as a strategic ammunition inside the boardroom? What's the non-technology leader's perspective on adoption of AI?
So first thing, I get very worried when the following words are used in the same sentence by anybody. Analytics, data science, AI, ML, IoT, blockchain. So anybody who's using etc. after that and etc. So if anybody uses this sequence of words in a sentence, I tend to run away from that person. And that should be the case likely because these are very different tools for different problems. Okay? And everybody is running after these golden shiny objects, which I call them, and they're being highly abused. Well, coming to the boardroom perspective, I think the board is much smarter now. Contrary to what I used to have in my early years, when we used to go to the board and say, "This is what we can do for you. This is how the technology can play for you." I think the conversation has gone reversed. Now the board is telling us, okay, they have now access to every information. Thanks to democratization of data and information, everybody knows about ChatGPT. Now every board member is far more ahead in their understanding of how ChatGPT works than somebody who's in the middle of the organization, being there for quite some time. So right now it's a catching up game. It's about how fast you can do. How every board wants your operations to be faster, cheaper, reliable. Okay, and they understand that artificial intelligence is the way to it. Now, how do you effectively use it it's where the discussion starts. So that's a change which is happening. Data was always there inside. Now artificial intelligence. Now, you used a term called generative AI, and I think that's the word of the year. Large language models, generative AI. Instead of hearing those words from the bottom of the pyramid, I'm hearing more of those words from the top of the pyramid. So that's the difference happening. Even I don't know whether they understand or not understand how they're used, but the frenzy is there. The awareness is there. They want to know more about it. They have logged in and they've understood. They have written something and which has popped up and they have made their mind blown away. So that is happening very frequently right now. So that's a change which is happening. Now the challenge is to deliver on those expectations. Because sometimes, I keep saying this is that we don't need a sword to cut an apple, a knife would do. So we probably do not need ChatGPT and generative AI to solve certain problems which are on the ground and their need and want might be different. So that's a balance which, the CIOs need to take and not just run after a shiny golden object altogether.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think over a period of time, we all realize that it has to be sustainable also. It's so dynamic that you cannot keep changing overnight and sort of perpetually and run after a shifting goal. One has to still have certain stability of approach and strategy to ensure that there is sustainability, because these managing such changes are also a lot of time and resource intensive. Tejasvi, coming to you, and then quickly in this context, managing a large multi-domain data analytics environment, landscape, workloads, what would be 1, 2, 3 maybe mistakes to avoid? Leveraging your lifetime's learning, if there are any top 3 tips in terms of mistakes to avoid, what would those be from you for the larger audience?
Well, I think that's a strong question. I would say that, 3 mistakes to avoid would be for the organizations to, perhaps not to formalize a data officer and a chief data office. I think that's one thing which I think can make leaps and bounds in terms of business outcomes for organizations. Having to formalize data, its management, its governance can actually, move the needle a lot, even on the outcomes as well as on the benefits, be it for the shareholders or stakeholders or employees. I mean, while that being said, how do organizations get to do it is by having the data officer sit on a boardroom, or having a CIO have an extended capability to be able to maneuver the data landscape, sit on the boardroom and talk about, what is intended for data to be managed as an enterprise asset. Now, we have been seeing since the Cadbury Code on corporate governance that data and intelligibility is important for the boardroom. And we have seen organizations like Enron, WorldCom, BCCI, and their leaders stating that, due to lack of intelligibility, they had to take certain decisions which in fact had impacted their firms and they had to go bankrupt. I think while the regulatory framework in India is quite strong, which in fact is helping the organizations to be quite stable on their scores as well as on their assets and the risks that they take, it's also important that there is governance and trust that is being cascaded from the grassroots to the board, which in fact says that if there is a decision being taken on whom we can lend to, and what is the margin that a bank can get of having to lend to, let's say, a prospective customer who is of a certain risk. If there is trust around that intelligibility, I think that can work leaps and bounds for organizations and banks. I think that's another tip which in fact I think I can state today Indian banking system can in fact embrace. And the third tip is, as I talked about corporate governance from the Cadbury Code, we have seen the evolution of IT governance and CEOs having to look at certain functions like IT risk to be able to manage the technology risk. Mm-hmm. And at the outset, what we don't get to realize is there is risk associated with data. which is privacy related, security related, which in fact can be related to the infrastructure that is running your data lakes, or even the artificial intelligence models or the LLMs. Now that risk also needs to be actively managed. And this can come out from having to formalize data governance, which can be an independent function, either sitting in the second line of defense or much closer to business in the first line of defense, to be able to maneuver and to be a guidepost for the data management teams as well as the business to actually, guide themselves towards outcomes. A simple example can be, something like in the 1800s, we actually had, not in India perhaps, in UK. We had horse carts, which in fact transported people from London to Farrington. Farrington is quite some miles away from London. At the outset, I think there were 1-2 carts which started off early. And as you know, the conglomerates which in fact get to formalize, the revenue streams from having to transport customers, came together, set up a company or a corporate, which in fact had certain number of carts, let's say 100 to 200. And they were transporting customers from London to Farrington. But what in fact was obstructing their business was, they were not able to entail to certain climatic risks, while it had, snowstorms or hailstorms or, perhaps winds which were obstructing the passengers and the customers. They also needed to, thrive off burglars, thieves who were in fact posing a significant risk to the horse carts. But at the outset, I think what they came up with is certain guideposts every 1 mile from London to the Farrington. And at the outset, these guideposts were in fact governing the movement of the vehicles, the health of the drivers, as well as the health of the horse carts, the health of the horses, which were transporting the customers, as well as the maintenance of the horse carts, which was required if there was a breakdown in between. So at the outset, I think we need to look at governance with more formalization in Indian banking system, which in fact can, have leaps and bounds in terms of generating outcomes, because they have an independent position and direction that can be given to the grassroots as well as to the board to navigate and maneuver.
Thanks. I think that example was very, very interesting. I have an eye on the clock. So Akash, coming quickly to you, but on a topic which is very, very contextual in India. This is the Indian Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, which is very soon going to become a law. So how, again, leading data analytics function in a largish, high volume consumer business, what would be your tips for data leaders to be ready for this, and what do they need to do to prepare, if at all, anything?
Yeah. No, I think it's very critical, and probably couple of things that I would want to, and something that we've already started is, to start early. And I think, there's, like we heard in the previous session, the speed at which the government is moving in terms of digital transformation, it's probably difficult for a lot of organizations also to catch up. And, it's always prudent to start early in that compliance journey and not really wait for the details to come out. Because again, the government is sort of notorious to mandate things from tomorrow onwards, and it's better to be prepared today than to fall back at a later stage. And I think the second thing I would suggest, again, briefly was mentioned in the previous session, is to err on the side of caution, right? So I think gone are the days where you would say, let's capture everything that we can capture, we'll figure out how to use it later. I think it's better to capture only those data points which are required today, and you have a plan how to use that. Otherwise, you're only accumulating risk and not really adding value.
Fantastic. Thank you. I see on the panel the time is up, but maybe quickly 1 or 2 questions from the audience. I see a few hands going up. Sir, you are in the front.
Thank you, Shantanu.
Please, quickly.
So my question, I'm Nirupam from Hero, looking at the strategy and AI initiatives. So my question is, what does the panel think of the generative AI? Is it a big hype, or are they implementing actually solutions in their companies on generative AI?
short answers, please. We, in the
May I,
interest of time. Yeah, please. Vinod, Dipali, please, one after the other.
So very interesting question. I think generative AI is here to stay, and all boardrooms are talking about it. But the question is of implementation. How do you implement a feasible LLM or a generative AI solution within your individual organization? The idea would be to start small, start in an area that you are well aware of, something like a chatbot, where you can control what is happening, what answers to give out. Once you do that, then you can expand to other areas within within the organization and open it to the whole thing. It's very important because if you lose the trust, if there is anything that goes wrong, if you've made a LLM, you've launched it, and for example, I am going to the chatbot and asking what is my balance, and he gives somebody else's balance to me, then there's a reputation risk that is there. So it is very important when you build the model that you need to test it. And once you're sure, then you can launch it. But all boardrooms are talking about it. It's a question of time and how to implement it. Thanks.
Dipali, you want to add something, please? Yeah.
I'll only speak for the marketing function. Out of the 25 CMOs that I've spoken in the last few weeks, there's only one who's genuinely experimented with it, because there is a tool, and I forget the name, I forget the tool's name, that's available for generating static posts. Mid-Journey, right? But the only issue is that, and here's my strong tip, that if you require only about 30 to 200 creatives in a month, I don't think the cost and the paraphernalia ecosystem that you need to build around it makes sense. However, for a particular brand, you require, let's say, 1,500 plus, kind of creators every month. That's when it makes sense for you to, hire a team in-house who knows how to query, and then who also will probably serve the job as an editor on the creative side. I think that's the only space where I've seen a use case. I've seen a lot of gyan on LinkedIn and a lot of people talking about it, but not a single use case where I ask people. Yeah.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening.
Sorry, please.
Yeah, hi, my name is Raja Raman here. Mr. Santanu and the highly empowered panel, I'm really thrilled to see such a kind of knowledgeable people on the dais. It's really a great kind of, even after the lunch, I think you made it very intelligent way of trying to have a panelist as it. So my question is kind of, very innovative kind of, thinking. See, with the kind of, the data being driven and the technology is being, enabled, the technology is being driven, AI is going to come. So do you feel, are we heading towards a kind of an arena where the robo is going to basically to rule the board, actually, rather than dispensing with all the human brains as such? Is that a kind of a scenario which are we contemplating? Because slowly we can try to see the thing is that it will be dispassionate in the decision making. It will be a kind of it will plug out the kind of relationship or emotion based kind of decisions can be also possibly avoided as a. So is the technology is driving to see that the boardroom is going to be future by robo boardroom? That is one. Second, is that kind of a current jobs? Currently we are, whatever, for example, I am a chartered accountant, a company secretary. So what is my future? For example, my own son or son's son, grandson and grandson, will they have a kind of an opportunity to have an employment, or it is going to be, future is going to be a kind of a threat? Is the technology is going to be a threat for a future generation with the over tech hype which is being created as it? Is that I may be also talking about over hype way, but if you think very seriously around say 30, 50 years down the line, are we going to have a kind of a board like this? Are we going to be a kind of
so one is that you should ask, you should put this question on the ChatGPT app and also on the Google search. I think you will get very interesting answers and articles. I don't think anybody has seen the world 40 or 50 years into future. I think we can safely speak only about 5 to 10 years next. And the parameter is not the function. The parameter is that if you're doing repetitive, boring tasks, they will be taken over by AI or generative AI. And humans will need to do higher order tasks. So I think that's how you need to really look at whether certain jobs will exist in future or not. Robo boards, not going to happen in the next 10 years. After that, I can't tell.
I just wanted to add to that, for example, when GST first came in, right, what we could automate now is if a supplier has not, filed his GST return and I'm not seeing that credit in GST 2A, we used to send out a physical, somebody used to sit and type out that mail and say, dear so-and-so, we are not be able to make this payment to you because, you've not filed your GST and we're not able to claim the GST. 2 years back, we automated that. And now we've replaced that person and given him some other task. So I think some of the mundane tasks will be able to be automated. So it's not the intelligent and the innovation will still continue to be human minds.
Great. I think in the interest of time, we'll take any more questions offline because we have a good set of sessions to come after this. So on behalf of all of us, again, a big round of applause and appreciation to all our eminent members of the board. A brilliant set of questions, answers, interaction, and thanks to the audience for being so patient, asking a few questions. Appreciate you all taking time, and thanks again to the entire boardroom.